Have you ever noticed some people only stay when you shine? They come into your life with eyes full of wonder, as if you're the most magical thing they've ever seen. They listen, they laugh, they say all the right things, but only when you're okay, only when you're smiling, only when you're strong, when you're holding it all together, when you're giving your light away without asking for anything in return. But one day, you're tired. You don't have the energy to inspire. You don't have the strength to carry anyone else. All you need is someone to sit beside you and not ask you to shine. But they're not there. And suddenly, you begin to see it. Maybe they never loved you. Maybe they only loved the way you made them feel. They loved your strength because it made them feel safe. They loved your smile because it distracted them from their own pain. But they didn't love your silence. They didn't love the ache you held quietly at night. They didn't stay for the tears you never spoke of. And now you wonder, what is love? If it disappears when I stop performing, can you think of a moment, a night you were breaking inside, but still had to say, I'm fine, because the person you loved grew distant every time you were real? They changed the subject. They stopped calling. They said you're being negative, so you swallowed your truth just to keep them close. But here's the truth. Real love doesn't show up just for your sunshine. It sits beside you in the dark. It doesn't ask you to sparkle. It asks you to stay human. So if someone walks away when you dim, let them. Because the one who's meant to stay won't need your light to see your worth. They'll see you even when you're quiet, even when you're tired, even when all you have to give is your presence. If this speaks to something inside you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a quiet thought in the comments, or share this with someone who's learning to stop performing for love. Let's keep walking each other home. Have you ever been with someone and felt like you were just talking to yourself? They agreed too quickly, understood too easily, repeated your exact words as if they'd been thinking the same thing all along. And at first, it felt magical, like finally someone sees me, someone gets me. But then, you begin to feel something strange. You realize you're not really seeing them. You're only seeing yourself reflected in their eyes, and they remain a blur. Some connections feel like perfect harmony in the beginning. You speak, they nod. You share, they echo. You doubt, they reassure instantly. You think, this time, I'm not alone. But slowly, you start to notice the silence behind their agreement. They have no real opinion, no boundary, no essence of their own. It's not presence, it's performance. They didn't come to understand you. They came to reflect themselves through you. You became their mirror, and they became the actor using your script to survive their emptiness. Not out of cruelty, but because they never had a true self to offer in return. And that's when the doubt begins. Was this connection real, or was it just an echo of my own voice? You start to replay the conversations. They felt deep, but in hindsight, they were hollow. You remember the way they lit up when you laughed but looked blank when you cried. And then it hits you. They didn't love you. They loved the version of you that made them feel seen. Real connection isn't found in agreement. It's found in truth. Not everyone who nods is listening. Not everyone who smiles is staying. Love isn't a mirror. It's a window. It opens into another soul. It shows you a world beyond your own. So if someone only mirrors you, only repeats you, only reflects you, set the mirror down and go find a soul with a light of its own, not to echo your shine, but to stand beside it. If this spoke to something inside you, subscribe, leave a thought, or share this with someone who's tired of being someone else's mirror. You deserve love that doesn't reflect you, but meets you. Have you ever looked at someone with your whole heart, only to realize you weren't seeing them any clearer? You were only seeing what you needed to believe. The mirror in front of you was never truly clear. You were staring through it with hope, not with truth. Here's something we rarely admit. When we fall for someone, especially after we've invested time, feelings, and fragile pieces of ourselves, we rewrite reality just to make it easier to stay. They pull away. Maybe they're just busy. They grow cold. They're probably going through something. They stop showing up. Maybe I did something wrong. See, we don't just forgive the silence, we paint over it. We dress it up. We call it patience. We name it understanding. But deep down, it never was. Epictetus once said, "If someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Stoic wisdom isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's not about walking away too soon. It's about seeing clearly without illusion, without rewriting the story just to make it bearable. Maybe you think you're in love, but maybe you're just in love with the version of them that only exists in your mind. A kinder version, a more patient one. Someone who could one day be what you hoped they might become. But hopes are not people, and wishful thinking is not love. That blurry mirror in front of you, it didn't fog over with time. You clouded it with expectations, with longing, with the ache to be loved so deeply that you stopped asking whether it was real. And here's the truth. Truth doesn't need to sparkle to matter. It doesn't have to feel good to set you free. A mature heart is not one that avoids pain. It's one that stands in front of the mirror, wipes away the fantasy, and dares to look at what's real, even when it doesn't feel beautiful. Because sometimes, what breaks your heart is not the truth itself. It's how long you waited to finally face it. Have you ever looked at someone with all your heart, and yet the more you stared, the less you saw them? You weren't seeing truth. You were seeing hope. You weren't holding clarity. You were holding on. The mirror in front of you was never clear. It was never meant to be. You just needed it to look like love. No one talks about this part. The quiet illusion, the rewriting, the little edits we make to keep the story soft enough to stay in. They disappear. Maybe they're just busy. They go distant. They're going through something. They stop trying. Maybe I did something wrong. Do you see? We don't just forgive silence. We decorate it. We light candles around it. We call it space. We name it maturity. But deep down, we know it isn't that. Epictetus once said, "If someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Stoic wisdom isn't about being cold. It isn't about cutting people off. It's about choosing truth over illusion, softly, gently, but firmly. It doesn't ask you to walk away from everyone. It simply asks you to stop painting flowers on a wall that's always been blank. You may think you're in love, but maybe you're just in love with who you hoped they could be. Someone more patient, more present, more willing. But that version only lives in your head. The mirror didn't fog over with time. It was blurry because you made it blurry. You filled it with stories, with waiting, with longing. You asked it to show you something beautiful instead of something real. But here's what I've learned. Truth doesn't need to sparkle to be sacred. It doesn't have to feel good to set you free. A mature heart isn't one that never breaks. It's the one that stands in front of a foggy mirror, wipes away the hope, and finally says, I see it now. And I'm not afraid to know. Because sometimes it's not the truth that breaks us. It's how long we waited to face it. If this speaks to your heart, subscribe, share it with someone still wiping the mirror, and leave a thought below. Because your truth may be the light someone else is waiting to see. You don't learn who truly loves you when life is beautiful. You learn it when the sky goes dark, when the rain comes, when your smile fades, when you stop being the sunshine in someone else's world. That's when you find out was the umbrella they gave you meant to keep you dry, or just to make them look kind. I used to believe that if someone once held my hand under the sun, they'd surely stay when the storm arrived. But one day, the sky broke open. The winds came fast. And I, like so many women, stood in the downpour, clutching an umbrella they once handed me with love, only to find it was torn. It leaked everywhere. It couldn't hold up to the weather because it was never meant to. Love isn't measured by how many times someone shows up when you're glowing. It's measured by who stays when you're breaking, who holds your silence without rushing to fix it, who sees your weakness and doesn't flinch. The Stoics said, we are not disturbed by events, but by the meaning we attach to them. You're not hurting because of the rain. You're hurting because you believed someone would stay. And maybe one day after the storm has passed, they'll come back. With a smile, a message, small talk, like nothing ever happened. But something has changed. You feel it. Because they didn't come back for you. They came back for the version of themselves that felt important when you were around. And now, you hesitate. Maybe there's still hope. But love doesn't leave when you need it most. Love doesn't disappear in the storm and return only when skies are clear. Don't let anyone teach you that love is a weather-dependent feeling. If they only hold your hand on sunny days, they don't deserve to walk beside you when the clouds return. So if today you finally realized that umbrella has been broken for a long time, fold it, lay it down, and walk. Even if it means walking alone, even if you're still wet with memory, walk anyway. Because at least now you're walking in truth, not in borrowed hope. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from exhaustion, or heartbreak, or giving up. It comes from finally understanding you no longer need to prove anything. You once bent yourself just to fit inside someone else's idea of love. You kept shrinking, softening, smiling when it hurt, because you didn't want to be left behind. You were strong on schedule. You were quiet on cue. You gave more than was ever asked, just to feel like you were enough. But then there came a moment, no final outburst, no dramatic goodbye, just stillness. And in that stillness, you realized you don't need to do it anymore. True transformation isn't loud. It doesn't always look like rebellion. Sometimes it just looks like not chasing, not explaining, not bending. You start to see you don't need someone walking beside you to know you're worthy of love. Because real love doesn't come from proving. It comes from clarity. And the clearest truth is this: Those who are meant for you will not ask you to earn their presence. When was the last time you sat alone in a quiet room, not searching, not comparing, not performing? When was the last time you were enough, even with no one watching? Not because you don't need people, but because you've finally stopped needing people to tell you who you are. This silence you feel, it's not emptiness. It's a return, a homecoming to your own soul. You no longer bow to be accepted. You've stood up inside a peace that doesn't need applause. So if today you find yourself sitting still, not out of sadness, but because you've understood, let me tell you something. Gently. This is not the end. This is the moment your real journey begins. If this spoke to something deep in you, don't keep it quiet. Share it, like it, subscribe if you'd like more spaces that feel like coming home. Sometimes, a small stone in your hand can weigh more than a whole relationship that once felt like everything. Why? Because the stone never promised, never pretended. It just stayed, and it was real. Have you ever held on to beautiful promises just because they sounded like love? I'll change. I'll come back. I'll never let go. They echoed like holy bells in your hopeful heart. But over time, the words faded. The people disappeared, and you were left with an empty hand and a heavy soul. Until one day, you stopped checking your phone. You stopped waiting for a knock on the door and a voice to say, "I've been thinking. I'm ready now." Instead, you sat down, in the quiet, in the truth, and you realized real love is measured by presence, not flowers, not plans, not future dreams, but by who's still beside you when all you have left is exhaustion. I remember once after a painful goodbye, a friend placed a stone in my hand. She didn't explain much. She just whispered, "Keep this," to remember that what stays through the storm is what's truly worth keeping. That stone didn't sparkle. It didn't glow. It wasn't beautiful, but it was real. It was weighty, and it never left. Just like real love, it doesn't blind you with charm. It doesn't make you drunk on sweet nothings. It makes you feel peace, because you no longer have to ask, "Is this real? Will they stay?" And if today you're holding a different kind of stone, a silent grief, a quiet knowing, a long overdue clarity, then you're not broken. You're seeing clearly. And yes, clarity can feel heavy, but it always sets you free. Real love doesn't need to promise. It shows up. It stays. Even when there's nothing left to give. Even when you're too tired to shine. Even when you're just you. Have you ever waited for someone, not because of who they were, but because of who you believed they could become kinder, more present, more loving? But maybe they never had that intention. Not once. I've been there. I've defended someone with the same wounds they caused. I stayed even when my heart was tired. I whispered to myself, "They'll change. They just need more time." But the truth, I wasn't in love with a person. I was in love with their potential, with hope I created, with a version of them that only existed in my own broken imagination. And maybe you still care. Maybe you still ache, still miss them. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But listen, caring is not a contract. It doesn't bind you to keep bleeding just to stay loyal. It doesn't require you to abandon yourself to prove you never abandon others. You can love and still walk away. You can hurt and still choose clarity. you can care and still say goodbye. That's not betrayal, that's loyalty. To yourself, to your peace, to your healing, to the sacred part of you that's learning how to love in the right direction. So please don't wait for someone to become someone they never were. You weren't born to be an emotional training ground for someone still confused about their own heart. If you've loved with everything, you also have the right to leave with everything clear. Not because you stopped caring, but because you cared enough to know this. Your patience should never be the reason you abandon yourself. If one day they come back and say, "I miss you," ask yourself, do they miss you, or do they just miss how they felt when you were near? I know, those 3 words can make your heart pause, make you smile, maybe even hope again. But before your heart opens that door, let your mind whisper. Are they knocking on your heart, or just on the memory of how you once made them feel important? There's a difference, a big one, between missing someone and missing the feeling of being loved by them. People come back, not always because they've changed. Often, it's because no one else makes them feel enough. They don't return because they finally saw your worth. They return because you were once their shelter, their light, the mirror that made them feel more than who they truly were. But when you broke, they left. They didn't walk beside you through the storm. They waited for sunshine. And if someone left when you needed them most, they don't deserve to be there when you've found yourself again. Because the one who's worthy doesn't need you to be perfect to stay. I'm not saying everyone who returns is insincere, but I am asking you to ask yourself, are they coming back for you, or for the version of you that once made them feel whole? You are not a rest stop for wandering emotions. You are a journey. And if someone didn't have the courage to walk beside you when you were in pieces, they don't belong when you've put yourself back together. The one who left you in the dark doesn't get to meet you in the light. So if today they say, "I miss you," smile. But don't believe so quickly. Because sometimes what they really miss is just the reflection of your light, not the woman who carried it. You don't have to cry to say goodbye. You don't have to scream. You don't have to break anything. Sometimes, a quiet truth is all it takes to end something that was no longer real. I know. You stayed because you loved. You held on tightly. You believed, if I just love enough, they'll see me. But one day you realize no one ever really came back, looked you in the eye and asked, "Are you okay?" They didn't love you. They loved the image you worked so hard to maintain, the one who's always fine, always smiling, always available. But you're not that person all the time. You're tired, you're hurting, and you're done performing in your own life. Real freedom doesn't start with a plane ticket. It starts when you stop trying to be someone else just to keep someone around. You're not walking away from love. You're walking away from a fantasy, from a role that drained you, that silenced you, that was never really yours. Not everyone deserves a ticket to your next chapter. Only those who can see you, without the filters, without the makeup, without the performance. And if today you are sitting quietly, not out of sadness, but out of clarity, then let me tell you, this is not the end. This is the beginning of something honest, of something whole, of you. If you ever held on to someone just because they smiled when you were shining, then now, try holding on to yourself, even when you're falling into pieces. Because no one deserves a version of you that had to lose itself just to be loved. Have you ever changed yourself just to fit someone else's kind of love? Spoke less, dreamed smaller, demanded nothing. You smiled more, softened more, held in the storm, just to be enough. And one day, you quietly asked, if I were truly myself, would they still stay? That question, light as breath, heavy as stone on your chest. Real love doesn't ask you to perform, doesn't make you better to be worthy. Real love stays when you're tired, when you're silent, when all you have left is you. And if they don't come back, it's okay. This journey is no longer about waiting. It's about returning to yourself, to your voice, to the spark you once hid away, to the you. That doesn't have to be dazzling to deserve love. Because if someone only chooses you when you're glowing, they don't deserve you when you're still healing. You deserve a love that never asks you to become someone else. A love where being yourself is enough.